Welcome, everyone. I'm Rick Schumacher with LBM Journal. I want to thank you for joining our webinar today on how technology is changing the way pros purchase supplies. The most important things you can offer your pro customers are time savings and convenience. As you build out your digital strategy and think about these critical efficiencies and how they bring value to your pros, there are easy solutions that don't require change management. In today's webinar, you'll learn to benefit from available technology to deliver an online process so your customers can quickly and accurately determine quantities, complete a purchase, track an estimate, and understand profitability, all while saving time and growing business. We're fortunate to have two excellent presenters for today's webinar. Steve Yates is Executive VP of BuildExact, who drives the company's North American priorities and key partnerships across the globe as part of BuildExact's growth strategy. A veteran in the industry with deep experience in the global supply chain, Steve is an entrepreneurial leader. His most recent role was as CEO of Cliftonvale, a California-based strategic planning, development, sourcing, and logistics company. And Steve is joined by Grant Farnsworth, president of the Farnsworth Group, which conducts custom research exclusively for the building products, home improvement, and lawn and ranch industries. For over 20 years, Grant has consulted on research for a variety of manufacturers, retailers, and associations, ranging from Fortune 100 firms to startups. Grant continues to gain industry knowledge through efforts with organizations like Harvard's Joint Center for Housing and the Home Improvement Research Institute. A couple of details before we get started. All attendees are muted, so you can hear us, but we can't hear you. If you're having technical issues, click the chat button at the bottom of the screen to send us a message, and we'll work to quickly address any technical issues. If you have questions for Steve or Grant, click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen anytime during the presentation, and they'll address as many questions as possible during the presentation. And lastly, we expect the webinar to be finished in about 30 to 40 minutes. We are recording it, and we'll send a link of the recording to everyone who registered. Plus, it will be posted on lbmjournal.com. And today's webinar is sponsored by BuildExact, who offers an easy-to-use construction management and estimating software designed for small builders and contractors. Go from plans to takeoffs, build estimates, plan project schedules, and track job progress. Then generate professional invoices, all from one simple cloud-based software package. Affordable, easy to get started, nothing to download or install. Learn more at buildexact.com. And with that, I turn it over to Steve and Grant.
Thanks for the introduction, Rick. As always, really appreciate LBM Journal and appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with your readership. And hi, Grant. Good to see you.
Always good to see you, Steve. Rick, thank you. Thanks to your team. Thanks to LBM Journal. Excited for today's chat.
Yeah.
Yes,
Grant, you and I have been working together for 4 years now. It's incredible how time flies. And I thought today it would be really valuable to the listeners to hear, kind of what we've been experiencing over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
You have such a pedigree in the research space, and you have such an intimate knowledge of what's happening in the industry, and we certainly appreciate that. And at the same time, we think compare and contrast your experience to ours as in applied technology could be really valuable for the listeners. So I'm hoping you and I can have a kind of a conversation about what we've been seeing today.
That's the plan. Yeah, I think, Steve, as we think about kind of setting the table for this discussion, it's about understanding what's in the minds, the needs, kind of the attitudes and behaviors of the pro in today's market. So for those that aren't familiar with our firm, we focus exclusively in the building products, home improvement space, and we help manufacturers and suppliers make better strategic decisions by conducting research specifically for their needs. And so we're talking with pros on pretty much a daily basis, either qualitatively or quantitatively, Steve. So I think by first understanding kind of what the world looks like for the professional, I think then again sets a really good stage for some of the work that we've done with the BuildExact team, talking to dealers, talking to pros, and then certainly why the solutions that BuildExact is coming up with are so important is it's not just technology for technology's sake, but it's really addressing how the pros are behaving, what they need, and what they expect, right?
Yes. Well, and of course, we did a pretty extensive project together in 2020, looking at the interface between builders, pros, and their supplier support suppliers. And you've just recently published an updated report for 2024, and it's really curious to me to see where the market was there to where it is now. So maybe that's a good jumping off point.
Yeah, let's start there. So let's look at what's happening today. So the Farms With Group puts out a public-facing report, our building product customer guide, and so we wrapped up this project in October of last year because it's really about a planning tool for our industry, so you can start again understanding the behaviors and attitudes of a variety of customer segments. In this report, we look at builders, remodelers, GCs, we look at architects, we look at specialty trades, and we also look at DIYers. But for today's conversation, Steve, we'll focus on really what those builder, remodeler, GC pros are kind of thinking and doing. And when we look at the areas of importance, we think about product criteria, product factors. How are they making product decisions? What's going on at that level? Availability was the big topic, right? In 2020, 21, 22, availability kind of reigned supreme. You really just had to have stuff on shelf and you were going to win, right? What we're starting to see now, though, and we were saying this back in 2023, is that, budget is beginning to become the new availability. It's not that availability has gone away completely. Depending on the category, it may still be very, very important. It may not be important at all. So that availability piece is still there, but we're seeing an increase in budget sensitivity and price sensitivity as well. And so what we mean by that is having transparency around pricing, having updated pricing. We know we've got some inputs, whether it's lumber or metal, whatever the case may be, that are changing pretty dynamically over the last few years. So the ability for a pro to understand what the current pricing is, we've seen it actually shift to become more important on a month-to-month basis than that availability piece.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I kind of took this extract out of your report, and just when I saw the top 4 priorities, I looked at it with a smile, because it was like, oh yeah, that's what we do. That's what construction management does, right? We're attempting to address each one of those priorities.
Yeah.
And I was in a conversation with one of our customers just 2 days ago, and asking him the question, how are you going with your supplier relationship? What's working with you and what's not? And ultimately, price, inventory, all those things matter, but ultimately it rolls up into time. Right. How effective they are using their time, and to what degree they're held back or able to move forward by virtue of the downstream support that they're getting from suppliers.
Yeah.
So really interesting to see that interlock. Right?
Well, and so what are the implications of that, right, Steve? What we've learned in the last 3 years is that contractors, pros, are a little bit more willing to try something new these days. That includes trying a new supplier to meet their needs. I think for those of us that have been in this industry for, more than a decade, contractors are typically not change agents. I do the same thing the same way time and time again, maybe the same way that my predecessors did it, and maybe even 2 generations ago did it. Well, what was a forced behavior was, through the height of the pandemic, was, trying a new product or trying a new supplier out of necessity. And what we saw is that 95% of those that tried a new brand, for example, so if you said you tried a new brand in the past year, if you did, what was your level of satisfaction? Over 95% of pros that have tried a new brand thought that brand was as good or better than the previous brand. So we've now got this environment where contractors have probably introduced some new brands and suppliers into their network. They're comfortable looking at new suppliers. So there is some risk here that if we're not meeting those contractor needs, they're a little bit more comfortable today trying somebody new than a few years ago. We saw in 2023 in this report, amongst builders, GCs, remodelers, anywhere from 27% to 65% tried a new supplier in 2023
Yeah, so this is really important piece, right? And I've actually got some of that data we'll show in a slide. So it's a really important piece. This is about relationship management, right? About retention, about when we look at where to generate from a supplier perspective, where to generate new business,
Yep.
At best, I think research is telling us at best, if I have an optimal relationship, maybe I'm getting 65% share of a total build at best,
That's right.
right?
And that,
So there's an opportunity to grow right there, right?
yeah,
And goodness gracious, I don't want to lose that share to go because an opportunity, whether it be inventory availability or price, has meant one of my customers has flicked out and looked at a competitor for the first time.
that's right. Yeah.
So you're going back to 2020, right? And the work that we did there on the left of the screen, right? To kind of picture of the magnitude of this issue for pro customers.
Yeah.
We were able to establish through that research. I can't recall exactly. I think it was 88 suppliers participated in the research program, and about 350 builders, something like that. It was a statistically valid cohort. And when you looked at averages, we saw these builders are spending, 24 hours a week just trying to work on quote and information from their supplier organizations. This is kind of pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And so then COVID hit and this all became much noisier.
Yeah.
And so what we found in our business, that COVID was a massive accelerant, right? Not just around the health aspects, but around just visibility. And so using our product to manage their entire enterprise, they're able to actually use the digital environment to be able to get access to information and to be able to solve for themselves in a way they weren't able to before.
That's right. Pros are on, like we saw across a lot of categories, be it pro, be it homeowner, the speed with which we increased online activity was really, really dramatic. We know that about half for just looking at LBMs only in the recent research that we've done for that guide you mentioned earlier, about half are buying in person, the other half are online or some other form of communication. So think about that. If half the time your pro customer isn't even walking through the door to tell you what they're going to buy today, how are you being able to service some of those digital elements and requirements? We see the same thing even just on the research side of things. So forget about the purchase. Before you even make the purchase, they are likely, statistically, we've got data on it across 20 different categories. It's very possible that they're actually doing more research online than they are going to be doing in your store to help inform the decision. So there is this technology component, Steve, that you are absolutely right, got exaggerated very, very quickly during the pandemic as a resource to be able to continue to operate their business. A lot of the folks listening on this call probably weren't deemed essential, right?
Yeah.
So their only connection to their customer was some sort of digital, non-in-person connection. And we've seen a lot of those patterns and a lot of those behaviors with the pros hold. In fact, one of the reasons, if they tried a new supplier, one of the top 3 reasons that they used a new supplier last year was online ordering.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily, I mean, some may have not been deemed essential, but it was also about preparation, right? When it comes to digital adoption, what state were you in when COVID started? And when we looked at, of course, just by price inflation, the total value in the industry was a significant upside. Everybody is well aware of that. But a large proportion of the additional dollars that were produced as a result of COVID and the increase in the building industry went to those people who were more prepared digitally at the time. And there was a scramble, a helter-skelter scramble to get click and collect, and discovery and shop online, pick up in store was just a major operational nightmare for a lot of people probably who are listening to this to try to catch up. And what we're seeing is that, okay, so that was then, but now we recognize how important this is for us. And what we have, your data that we have on the screen now is beginning to see, from even where we were in 2020 to now, to see the amount of the incidence or the percentage of product actually being acquired online is substantially increasing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Across a lot of categories. And I think it also ties into the data you were sharing that we did, that the Farnsworth Group did with Build-Exact on that research where, we were moving in that direction, Steve. It's not like this was a new thing that popped up, in the last 4 years. It was accelerated like so many other things. And there's a reason Why? I mean, if you look at the builders and modelers, it takes 4 hours on average, the research we did for you, four hours on average to create a quote, right? They're using an average of 3 suppliers. When they send out that quote, they're averaging 3 suppliers that they're sending it out to. So again, those listening in, as an LBM dealer, you may have a customer that you think is tried and true and maybe giving you a good bulk of their business, but that still doesn't prevent them from throwing it out to some others just to keep everybody honest. So, and then when you think that they're doing an average of 6 quotes a week, that's a lot of time. So if you can help me with some efficiencies in my business, that's the relationship. That's the critical point. You have to be right now. I mean, we talk about this with manufacturers and suppliers on a regular basis, but we have to be where they are, how they want it, when they want it.
Yeah.
And the way they run and manage their business, Steve, right? I mean, it's changing, and it's been changing quite rapidly with the implementation of some technology to help manage their projects.
Yeah, and so and let's look at that change. And while you're consuming the slide, just a point that I want to make on that is that we will observe quite a lot where a builder-supplier relationship, or a supplier who believes they have a really loyal customer, they may have had that customer for 10 years, but the actual range width that customer is purchasing on a regular basis is very narrow relative to the overall offer of the supplier. And it's quite astounding at how little awareness that customer may have of the full offer that supplier has in the market. So this is going to that total bill. And if you focus on visibility, and if you use digital tools to be able to get more range visibility, then there's a very real opportunity to grow share with existing customers as much as it is to bring in new customers. And conversely, looking at your data here on the left-hand side, this 45%, these numbers here of what's driving new supplier use is an indicator of some of the opportunities and challenges that the industry is confronting right now.
Absolutely. And you'll see some nuances there on that slide on the left, or on the chart on the left. The larger, more sophisticated the pros, Steve,
yeah,
the more likely they are to look for somebody that has these more sophisticated tools and technologies. So again, for those listening, think about who you're going after and who you want to win with. It may be that larger pro. And if the larger they get, you better believe the more likely they are to expect some level of sophistication with the tools you're offering them. That's how you're going to attract and keep them. And then, Steve, to your point too, I'm right there with you, man. There's just so much opportunity to increase share with existing before you even start looking at new. Through the research that we did with BuildExact together, the pros we surveyed are using on average 4 suppliers for a single project.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that low-hanging fruit or what?
I mean, I think in fairness, some of that is around specialization, right? So it's like
100%.
roofing, for example, that would be an example where you would get that. But there's also a lot in there that's just about lack of visibility, right? Just that pipe, that relationship, that pipe isn't open enough, right?
Right.
To be able to get the value. And where is this going? We hit 2017, 18% of, this is BCG data, 18% of sales online. Now we're at a point where after COVID, there's an expectation that that's going to expand to 41% by 2017. And what we did see early is in 2019, in our research together, 32% of quote requests are being made online. Now, a lot of those quote requests are web form type quote submittals in an e-commerce environment, not very sophisticated, and there's a demand for better quality information to flow both ways in that quote request through the e-commerce environment, which kind of takes us to another area that you and I haven't explored in research project together, but which is coming out of our work in the field. I always, when I look at this issue around, what I want to do is compare and contrast, buying a simple product online versus a complex product online. When we see the early successes in e-commerce, everyone really thinks about Amazon and the choice around books, right? And then you could also look at how resistant the building materials supply industry has been to e-commerce and to the development of that. And we think, and I don't have any quantitative basis for this, but qualitatively, we believe that that's because it's far more difficult to order a complex product, a component
100%.
assembly, a build assembly in an e-commerce environment. And so where we have moved over the last 4 years and what we've learned is that we need to provide much more assistance to suppliers using the digital environment to be able to configure or to have their customers be able to self-configure and calculate quantities for complex product. And so part of the reason why we're talking today, and thank you, Rick, is that we are launching product today to solve this problem. And we believe solving this configurator piece is a key accelerant that will contribute to those numbers that BCG just put up around the 40%, 41% growth in e-commerce.
Yeah.
Once the builders are able to get these complex products into their shopping cart, things are going to move much faster again.
Yeah, and I think this is also important to understand, not only from the dealer side, the pro side. It is for everybody. The idea that builders and remodelers and GCs don't want to do takeoffs and that they're dependent upon their dealer was kind of debunked in the research we did. Right, we saw 53% of builders and remodelers agree with the statement that they would like to do their own takeoffs. So over half of the pros we spoke with said, "I'd like to do my own." Yet only 20% of the dealers we spoke with believed that that was the case. 20% believed that pros wanted to do their own takeoffs. So there is this disconnect, Steve, to your point, between the dealers and the pros, where the dealers say, no, they want us to do it. And the pros saying, I don't know, I'd like to have that ability to do it myself. But because it is such a complex ecosystem, I think you're spot on, Steve. It's historically been very, very difficult to give that capability to the pro. But we know they want it. So if we can solve for that, I think it gives the pro some satisfaction. And we also know it's going to help out the dealer because there's an inordinate amount of time that sales reps at dealers spend managing takeoff and order requests. So how can you minimize the back and forths with your sales team and the cost of that if that tool is accessible now to both sides, right?
Yeah, and I think being in the field for 4 years, I can say very clearly, if we throw a party, not everybody's going to come. That doesn't mean that the party is not a success, right? And we knew in 2020 that 23% of builders are using construction management software. And they were typically going to be the emergent builders, right? Maybe younger, digital natives is another word. They're higher propensity. It's not going to be everybody, right? There are builders out there who will never do this digitally, but where is the growth going to come from, I think, is one thing. And I think the other thing that we kind of struggle with in communicating is it's not an either or. There's a lot of dealers out there that have invested rightly quite a lot in developing the ability to produce takeoffs and services for their builders.
Still have to do it. You still have
And
to have
when
the
they look
ability.
at it and say, well, hold on a minute, you're telling me my builders want to do it themselves, but that's my whole added value proposition right there.
Great point. You're right. We're not killing the messenger here. We're not saying no. But it's that idea of allowing what, in some cases they may want you to do it. In some cases they want to do it themselves. What we've learned in these last 4 years more than ever is that the customer is calling the shots. Yes. They're going to go where they want, when they want, how they want to get what they want. And if you can't provide it to them, they've got options. So that's the narrative here, Steve, that we see is that we're not saying you're spot on. It's not either or. It's an and statement, but it's making sure that you're providing them the tools that they want at that time to meet their needs. How are you helping them in this world today? Yeah, and I have just a simple graphic up there. It's fairly small, but the bar line above. Let's just start out. We want to estimate a project, and from a builder, I want to get a bill of materials, a bill of quantities, and I want to get high fidelity in my costs, and I want to do that for my total build.
And then from a supplier point of view, I know that my customer is doing that build. I want to have the greatest share of that as I possibly can. And I'm kind of, this is going to change project by project, but here's an example of someone using a platform like BuildExact where the digital collaboration on that total project estimate can occur. The takeoffs can be done in multiple ways. The supplier could be doing the frame and truss calculation, which requires engineered values. At the same time, the builder is inputting component assemblies because they have the price book feed in there. So it's all happening at once on the one estimate, but it's happening in a collaborative way.
Yeah, that's great.
We'll talk a little bit about time in a moment, but this is your research on the left here. There's and this is where there's huge opportunity.
Yeah.
Owners and executives of managing sales programs at LBM dealers very clearly see that the optimal value of their sales rep time is spending time with their customers to understand their needs from a qualitative point of view and prospecting for new customers. But what actually happens? Less than 12%, less than 15% of the time is actually spent prospecting for new customers.
Yep.
And 40% of the time is just managing emails and phone calls. Your research led to, I think one of the outcomes was that for every quote request coming into a dealer, there was 6 internal communications required to actually stand up an answer.
That's right.
That's a lot of noise. And that's contributing to this 33% of the time just being spent inefficiently.
Yep.
So when you kind of go back up to this, how does a project get estimated? We anticipate, certainly our product anticipates this, is the technology is not to replace relationship, it's to actually take the low value tasks out of the way and to create a more frictionless way to be able to collaborate together.
Yep.
And I think that's the piece. It's not either or, it's not the old way or the new way. It's we're going to meet our customers where they are, as you suggested.
Right. Yeah. And Rick, I'm wondering, is there a question that came in that's on this topic here?
Yes, there is, as a matter of fact. So question, actually, he has a comment. He said, great information. First of all, are the slides going to be available to us after? Because I really want to share this information with my team. So yes, wonderful. So we'll share we'll send the slide deck with the link to the recording to everybody who registered. And then also he said, the idea of having builders do their own takeoffs, he would love that because doing takeoffs takes up a lot of their time. And then when you're doing the takeoff for someone, you don't get the business. That's just it's just throwing money away. So if that's something that BuildExact software can help with, he said he's interested in learning more.
That's great. I think when I began this journey a few years ago, and I had some time in the industry prior to working with BuildExact, there's such a low trust relationship between builder and supplier for that very reason, and the convention was a builder would bring a set of plans into a trade desk or a pro desk, and they'd be asked to pay $700 or $800 on a credit card, as a surety. Come back in 10 or 14 days time and we'll give you a bill of quantities. And if you actually buy the product from us, we'll credit you back the $800 that we tagged you for on your credit card, right? That's what I would call a low trust relationship, right? And this was only 2019. And just to think about how that's changed, right, in 5 years. And to see, Rick, I know there are quite a few people listening in on this, and that's evidence of the interest that is occurring in trying to move to a trust-based relationship, the one that's more about collaboration.
Yeah.
And if I could just, for a minute, just share with the listeners just what actually happens when you go to that trust-based relationship. Now, for privacy reasons, I won't disclose who these results are coming from, but these are results in the field from suppliers who have made this digital transformation and committed to assisting their builders to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
We have one instance, we have a vertically integrated supplier with a frame and truss plan. They reduced the turnaround time to create a frame and truss quote from 5 days to 1 day. They're doing it same day now using the technology. And that's primarily, we won't be in this today, but that's primarily due to the templating and the abilities of the technology to do that.
Yeah.
We've got other suppliers that are showing $5,000 increase average builder spend in per month, of connections. So it's very, very powerful effect that happens when you open up this funnel.
Yeah.
We do have one follow-up question
Yeah.
to that, if
Yeah.
I can interrupt. Okay. So the builders who wanted to do their own takeoffs, did they specify the reason they want to do their own takeoffs? Example, the time it takes to get the takeoffs back?
Yeah, so great question, Rick, and the individual that submitted it. We didn't ask specifically in the research that we did with Build Exact, why do you want to do that, right? We didn't get into the qualitative piece of it, but what I can say is anecdotally, we've got some indicators, we've got some markers here that help us understand of why that may be the case. So we already talked about two things that are driving a lot of decision making right now amongst pros and really in our space collectively, and that's the availability component and the pricing component. Budget has become more and more important over the last 12 months. We believe it's going to be an important theme for 2024. And so having price visibility is probably one of those things that they want to see. Again, we're not saying you have to be the cheapest thing in the world, but just understanding what my options are. And then if the product is in stock and available for the project that I need to be starting in a month. But there's this third thing that is happening that we believe is also contributing, and that is the time aspect. So one thing we did capture in the research we did, Steve, together, is that we found, we already talked about, it takes about 4 hours for the builder or remodeler to create a quote request that they then send out. But on average, a builder or remodeler receives a supplier quote back in roughly 19 hours, and they turn that quote around to their client and then in roughly 28 hours from the time that they spent developing that initial request to the supplier. It's even a longer process the smaller the contractor firm. So I think the availability piece of it, having transparency and visibility on availability, having transparency and awareness of pricing, and I think that time component is a big one. If you can cut my turnaround time to a client from 28 hours, if I can cut that down to 5 because I can do it myself, I think those three things, even though we didn't ask it specifically, Steve, would you agree that those three elements are?
Yeah, I think they're very key, but I think there's another important element here, and that is I think everyone on this call would probably empathize with the experience of a contractor who says, this is my project, right? I'm on the hook for this, right? I'm setting this project up, and if I want this project to come in on time and on budget, I better damn well know what's going into it. And so is a huge, what we hear from our builders is the time is critical, but it's also having confidence that my bill of quantities is accurate and right.
Yep.
Right. Now, if we roll back 6 or 7 years, they didn't have a tool that would allow them to do that efficiently, and so they would go to their supplier with a plan set and say, "Hey, can you help me out?" Right. It didn't mitigate the risk, but now that they have the technology, and if they're leaning into that and they're adopting technology, this gives them a level of confidence. We have research that shows ordinarily, in the absence of this kind of fidelity when attempting to win a job, a builder will add 20% to the overhead and profit as a fudge factor when they submit the job, right? And of course, that impacts their quote to award rate. So if they have more accuracy and more confidence, they don't have to add that 20%, which, by the way, they lose in job management. Then they're going to win more work. So our builders see the ability to do their own takeoffs as a really important component of their ability to understand that project inputs are going to reflect what the project output's going to be. Or one of them would say, if a project looks ugly at the beginning, it's probably going to look ugly at the end. And they really want to understand. And so
Yep.
Either to the extent the supplier can participate or help in that, it will add to that loyal relationship with the supplier. It's really getting to the qualitative conversation.
Great points.
Yeah. Okay. I jumped ahead. Did I get all those? Did we get all those questions, Rick?
I think we're covered. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks like.
Okay. So some really important outcomes that are happening here. And I won't get into, there are things that we know, there are principles called network effect that where once somebody invests in the digital technology, how that creates loyalty and how that simplifies and how the reduction of friction actually starts to drive their behavior and how they shop. Remember that Grant said there's 4 suppliers for every job. Well, in this case, you can see here is a 51% category uplift on the right-hand side with one of the supplier groups. What that means is they've had a 51% increase in the number of categories that their customers are buying from. And that's simply a product of the visibility of the integration the suppliers made digitally with the customer. The other piece I think that I would just call out before we move on is this increase in value of online quote opportunities. Builders, I think it's in order of 70% of our builders elect to share their project data with their supplier. So that means that they allow their supplier to see inside the project level activity that they have going on as an enterprise. And that means the suppliers are able to have a much greater view of what is coming in their market catchment area. It's much easier to see a real world evidence of how many projects are coming out of framing in 14 weeks' time, how many projects are closing out, and that's creating much more visibility for the suppliers and directing sales teams accordingly. So pretty important outcomes that are being achieved. Grant, I'd like to just kind of, we get close to finishing here, but I just wanted to stop on one element. A lot of people are concerned that technology is somehow going to supplant relationship sales, that somehow technology is seen as an alternative or the absence of relationship. And in fact, it's the opposite. That if you take that noise, all that inefficient communications that we showed in the research and took that out and your salespeople had more time to be actually having conversations with their customers about their projects and about how to qualitatively improve those projects. The technology actually really enhances the relationship. Right? It has that network effect working for you, but it enables you to broaden and extend the degree of collaboration, and that's really important work. Have you seen any evidence of that, or have you?
No, technology is a tool. It is not a replacement for the relationship. It's not a replacement for the knowledge. It's not a replacement for the support and service that builders and remodelers come to expect, particularly from the LBM dealers, right? There's always been that stronghold of the service element that LBM offers better than other channels, better than the home centers or others might be able to. That isn't going away. We haven't heard any indications. We haven't seen any indications that's going away, and in fact, quite the opposite. So as we have labor challenges over the last several years, they're going to be continuing going forward. We've got a busy market. Currently, we know we're in a little bit of a softening right now, but there is a runway, arguably, of the next 8 to 10 years of steady, constant growth. So think about that, where we've got a lot of project opportunity currently and ahead of us with too few bodies to do it. They're looking to you for service, for support, for relationship, and they're looking to you to offer tools that allow them to be more efficient with their time because they don't have enough of it to get the work done that they have in front of them. So it is not to supplant any sort of relationship or human interaction. It is asking you to be more efficient and help them be more efficient with their projects, with their customers. One clear example of that, Steve, in the research that we did together, pricing is a very, very important element to them. Okay? They're not saying they don't want to deal with you, but they're saying they're asking for your help in understanding what pricing is today. In the research that we did with BuildExact, 26% of dealers updated the prices quarterly.
Yeah.
Quarterly. That's not servicing the pro, okay? But you can use technology to help your sales team offload some of those mundane tasks and instead allocate that time towards what's important to the pro, which is give me some gosh darn updated pricing. That's what we're talking about, Steve. So I wholeheartely agree with use technology as a tool to allocate your resources to what's important to the pro.
Yeah. And I think I think another important thought I would like to leave with the audience as well is we sometimes forget our customers are in competition as well.
That's right.
They're competing in a marketplace, and as Matthew you eloquently said here, I realize I'm not a big player. I realize I've got to wait on callbacks. I'm probably second, third, fourth in line. And I understand that that's the nature of where I am, but in this Matt's case, he's a successful, growing business, wants to grow, right? But his overall feeling of having a level playing field against his competition is a pretty powerful emotive response, right? It's like if you could actually go to your customers and they walk away feeling like they're more competitive in their environment, I think you're gonna go a long way.
Yep, great point.
Yeah. Okay, so just to wrap up and just do some housekeeping, all right? And I will say, so going back over the last 4 years, and many people in the audience I may have spoken to already, when we brought our product to the market in 2021, we provided a solution that really focused on integrating with the construction management software. And we realized and in talking to you over the years that you're also, many of you making investments in solving this e-commerce piece. And so bringing all of the things that we've talked about today into your e-commerce environment, so, and you go back to the search data that Grant, the product discovery information that Grant shared with you. If those customers are in your e-commerce environment, then we've created the opportunity for you actually to put this type of tool into that environment so that your pro customers find it easy to be able to complete a purchase with you. So they can do that complex product ordering inside your e-commerce. We think it's important. We think it's another way of reducing friction. And we really hope that as you look forward, that you see there may be a way for you to add service to your customers this way. So it's been an interesting 4 years, Grant. We started out with some hypotheses, right? And we've seen this industry change in front of us.
It's changing quicker and quicker as time moves on. So looking forward to the next 4 years. I think we've got some great opportunity, but grateful for you, grateful for Rick and LBM for the time today.
Yeah, and we have one more comment, and that just thanks. They love the information and love the research especially. So thanks, Grant, for sharing the research. And Steve, I remember when BuildExact launched in the US, and I thought you guys are maybe just a little bit ahead of your time. And now it's like the momentum is clearly growing, and you're doing the things that dealers want and that builders want. Yeah. So congratulations on the timing and on the momentum for you guys.
Yeah, Rick, thank you for that. And I will say, and I hope that people get a sense of this in listening to us today. The last thing you want is a technology company that doesn't understand what you're doing, what pain points you have on a day-to-day basis. I mean, there's a lot of things we're not, but what we are is really experienced in this industry. And I'm not a technologist, right? I've been in this construction space for a long time. So I think if anything, the way that we all solve together, whether it's Grant and I working together with Rick or even suppliers and stuff, is to have these kind of conversations. And the intent to be a partner is probably absolutely top of our ability to be successful together. So I appreciate both of you a lot, and I appreciate the audience. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Grant and Steve, thank you. And we'll see everybody next time.
Very good.
Have a good day.